The first time Layla Mensa heard the phrase a mirror ledger, it was whispered like a prayer and a threat. A customs officer in Dover slid a crumpled note across the counter and said, "If you print this, they will call you paranoid. If you don't, they'll call you paid." The note had one line: billions move through nothing. Layla was an investigative producer who'd covered corruption for a decade, but this felt different. Not a bribe, not a kickback, a system. A machine that stayed alive because too many governments needed it to. It started with a perfectly legal tender. A government ministry announced a national resilience program full of clean words: infrastructure, emergency supply chains, climate adaptation. The contract went to a company called Northbridge Relief Logistics. On paper, it was competent, compliant, even patriotic. But when Layla pulled the filings, Northbridge had no warehouse, no fleet, and no employees. Just a registered address above a closed nail salon. She called the ministry for comment. The spokesperson sounded bored. "We follow procurement law," he said. "Next question." That was a first tell. Nobody was curious. The second tell was the speed. In 6 weeks, Northbridge received £480 million. In 8, it received another £620 million. The payments were milestone-based. Milestones for what exactly, nobody could explain without sliding into jargon. Layla tracked the money through public ledgers until it vanished into a private bank in Luxembourg. Then it split into 50 smaller rivers, all flowing into shell firms with names that sounded like charities: Aurora Care, Marlin Foundation, Blue Well Children's Trust. The names were clean. The money was not. She sent a message to her editor. "This is a £1 billion ghost." A week later, a man emailed her from an encrypted address. Subject line: "You are looking at the wrong END." He called himself Jonas. He said he had worked inside procurement compliance, the place governments pointed to whenever they wanted to look honest. "You're tracking payments," Jonas wrote. "Track the paperwork that justifies them. The scam isn't the theft. The scam is the fiction that makes theft look like policy." He attached a file, an invoice for 12 million portable water purification units, shipped to a flood zone that hadn't flooded in 10 years. The receipt was signed by someone who didn't exist. Layla did what she always did. She verified. She called the local council listed on the delivery note. The clerk laughed, then went quiet. "We never ordered that," the clerk said, "but we were told not to question it." Layla asked who told them. The clerk hesitated, then answered like someone reading a script. "Central directive. It's sensitive." Layla hung up and stared at her wall of notes. £1 billion doesn't disappear by accident. It disappears because everyone in the chain has been trained to treat questions as disloyalty. The mirror ledger was not hidden. It was protected by manners. Jonas met her in a hotel lobby near King's Cross, the kind with warm lighting and no memory. He was mid-30s, tidy and watchful, like someone who had spent years measuring risk for a living. "This is bigger than one ministry," he said. "It's a global routine. Governments outsource a problem, overpay for the solution, and quietly recycle the surplus into places nobody audits." Layla asked the obvious. Why would they do that? Jonas didn't blink. Because it funds the things they can't admit. Political slush, intelligence operations, emergency cushions, and private pockets. Of course, everyone gets something. He explained the core trick in plain language. Create a crisis, or borrow one. Announce urgency. Use emergency procurement clauses. Award contracts to pre-approved vendors. Inflate unit costs. Pay fast. Then reconcile later with paperwork that looks official enough to survive a shallow audit. The reconciliation is a mirror ledger, Jonas said. 2 realities. One for the public. One for the people who eat. Layla asked where the goods went. Jonas smiled without humor. Sometimes nowhere. Sometimes they send junk to prove movement. Sometimes they ship real items, but far less than build. The point is not delivery. The point is plausible deniability. Layla wanted one clean thread, one contract she could hold up to the light. Jonas gave her a name, a mid-level civil servant called Harriet Klein, procurement lead on the resilience program. She signs the approvals, Jonas said, not because she's the mastermind, but because she's a hinge. If she breaks, the door opens. Layla didn't like the idea of targeting a person who might be trapped, but she also knew how systems stayed intact. They turned ordinary people into shields. She requested Harriet's public diary of meetings. It was full of stakeholder sessions with one recurring attendee, a consultant named Edwin Soto. Soto's firm, Meridian Advisory, marketed itself as public-private coordination specialists. Their website had stock photos of hard hats and handshakes. Yet their client list, scraped from conference brochures, read like a map of power: ministries, central banks, defense committees. Layla dug deeper and found a pattern. Meridian appeared whenever there was money to spend quickly: pandemics, border security, energy shortages. They didn't build anything. They structured delivery, which was another way of saying they structured escape routes for cash. She tried to interview Soto. He replied within minutes, polite and empty. "We help governments meet urgent needs. We do not comment on ongoing programs." Then came the first warning that wasn't subtle. A brown envelope arrived at her flat. Inside was a single printed screenshot of her bank account balance. Under it, a note: "You are expensive to keep alive." Layla called Jonas. "They're inside my life," she said. Jonas exhaled. "They always are. This isn't a scandal. It's a service." He told her to move her files offline and stop using her normal number. That night, she sat on her kitchen floor, laptop open, and asked herself the hardest question in journalism. Not is this true, but is anyone willing to let it be true? Because if government pretended it didn't exist, it meant they preferred to lie. Layla reached out to a retired auditor she trusted, a woman named Diane Mercer who had once resigned on principle and paid for it with her career. Diane listened, then said, "You're describing the dark twin of public finance." Layla asked what that meant. Diane replied, "The official budget is a story they tell voters. The unofficial budget is what keeps the state flexible and sometimes dainty. If you expose it, they'll claim you're endangering national security, even when it's just theft." Diane offered one piece of advice: don't chase morality, chase math. Find a number they cannot explain without admitting the trick. So Layla chased math. She compared procurement data across 5 countries that had launched similar resilience programs. The language was identical, as if written by the same hand. The vendor networks overlapped, like a traveling circus. Northbridge Relief Logistics in the UK, Kestrel Response Group in Canada, Alio Sustainment in Australia. Different names, same directors, same law firms. She built a spreadsheet of payments and found the heartbeat. Every quarter, a surge of accelerated disbursements right before budget hearings. Like clockwork, billions were spent fast to avoid scrutiny. Governments didn't pretend the scam didn't exist because they didn't know. They pretended because the timing was useful. Jonas gave her something more dangerous than invoices: a recorded call. It was Harriet Klein speaking to someone she called Edwin. Harriet sounded tired, not evil. "If we don't move the fund by Friday, Treasury will claw it back," she said. "Then what?" Edwin's voice was smooth. "Then your minister looks unprepared. Then your program gets cut. Then next winter, when the headlines hit, you'll be blamed for not acting." Harriet hesitated. "But the units don't exist." Edwin didn't raise his voice. "Harriet, the units are narrative. Your job is to keep the narrative funded." Layla replayed that line until it made her feel sick. She tried to talk to Harriet directly. She sent a careful message, framed as a right of reply. Harriet responded from a private email: "Please stop." 2 words, heavy as a door slamming. Layla pushed once more, offering confidentiality. Harriet agreed to a brief meeting in a quiet cafe, then arrived 20 minutes late, eyes scanning exits. "You don't understand what you're touching," Harriet said. "They'll destroy you." Layla asked who they were. Harriet shook her head. "Not one person. A committee of convenience. People who can't be seen together, but vote the same when it matters." Her hands trembled around her cup. Harriet didn't deny the scam. She explained how it worked from the inside. The pressure came from above, framed as patriotism. "They tell us the public wants resilience," she said, "but the public doesn't want to pay for it. So they create off-book cushions." Layla asked about kickbacks. Harriet looked insulted, then laughed. "Of course there are kickbacks," she said. "But that's not the engine. The engine is fear. Fear of being the minister caught empty-handed when the next crisis hits. Fear of losing elections. Fear of looking weak." Harriet leaned closer. "So they overpay their friends, and their friends give the surplus back in ways the state can use without receipts." Layla asked a question that haunted her. "Where does the money go?" Harriet's answer came in fragments. Some went into strategic partnerships, which meant consulting contracts for retired officials. Some went into think tanks that shaped policy narratives. Some went offshore and returned as foreign investment in friendly projects. And some, Harriet admitted quietly, went into political war chess. "It's laundering," Harriet said, "but with flags." She paused, then added, "There's a reason they call it the mirror ledger. The same money is counted twice, once as public spending, once as private profit. Nobody wants to break the mirror because they like what they see in it." Layla left the cafe with her heart pounding and her ethics bruised. Harriet wasn't a villain in a black suit. She was a bureaucrat trapped in a machine that rewarded compliance and punished honesty. That made the story harder, not easier, because the audience loved bad guys. They didn't love systems. Systems felt abstract. Layla needed a spine. Jonas suggested one. "Find the warehouse," he said. "The fake one." He gave her a location code tied to the water unit invoices, a logistics park outside Rotterdam. "If the units exist," Jonas said, "they'll be there. If they don't, you'll still find the proof." Scams always leave footprints where reality is supposed to be. At Rotterdam, Layla met a night guard who looked at her press card like it was a joke. "No deliveries here," he said. She walked the perimeter anyway. The building was enormous, pristine, and empty. No trucks, no pallets, no signs of life. Through a side window, she saw only dust and fluorescent lights. She filmed quietly, hands steady, stomach turning. Then a van rolled in and parked without headlights. Two men got out, didn't look at her, and entered through a side door. Layla retreated behind a concrete barrier, camera rolling. 10 minutes later, the van left. She didn't know what she had captured, but she knew she wasn't supposed to. Back in London, her editor watched the footage and went pale. "This is real," he said, "but real doesn't mean safe." The network's lawyers demanded corroboration, not because they doubted her, but because they feared the blowback. Layla understood. A billion-dollar scam that government pretended didn't exist wasn't just a story. It was an accusation against the architecture of power. She offered them Harriet's audio, but they balked. "We can't air a whistleblower recording if it triggers national security claims," the lawyer said. Layla snapped, "Since when is theft national security?" The lawyer replied, "Since the state says it is." Jonas called that night with a new piece of intel. "They are preparing a cleanup," he said. "A controlled scandal. They'll sacrifice one contractor, prosecute one minor fraud, and announce reforms. It'll look like accountability, but it's just pruning." Layla had seen that pattern before. Catch a small fish to protect the sea. She asked Jonas how he knew. He was silent for a beat. "Because I wrote some of the reform language," he admitted. "Years ago, I thought I was making it safer. I was making it harder to investigate." His voice cracked, just slightly. "This time, we don't let them buy closure." Layla hung up and felt the weight of complicity spreading like ink. The next morning, a government statement hit the wires. An internal review has found minor irregularities in resilience procurement. Authorities will pursue appropriate action. Minor irregularities. Layla laughed, but it came out like a cough. Harriet messaged her, "They're coming for me." Layla told her to go to a solicitor. Harriet replied, "No, they're not coming with warrants. They are coming with fear." Then Harriet went silent. 2 hours later, Jonas sent a single line. "Harriet has been placed on immediate leave pending investigation." That was a polite version. The real version was simpler. The hinge was being removed. If Harriet broke publicly, the story would become Bad Apple, not Bad Orchard. Layla pivoted. If they were staging a cleanup, she needed to show the full pipeline, from government tender to offshore recycling to political benefit. Diane, the retired auditor, helped her map the mechanism. Inflated contract created surplus. Surplus moved into shell foundations. Foundations donated to international initiatives. Initiatives hired consultants. Consultant paid speakers' fees and strategy retainers to insiders. Insiders shaped the next crisis narrative that justified the next emergency procurement. A self-feeding loop. Layla wrote it on a whiteboard and stared. This wasn't corruption in the corners. It was corruption as a budget tool. Governments didn't pretend it didn't exist. They pretended it was necessary. She needed one undeniable receipt. Jonas delivered it in the form of a ledger export from Meridian Advisory. It showed a payment described as public communication stabilization, routed through a charity shell, then paid out to a political consultancy linked to 3 ruling party donors. The amount, £96 million. For communications. Layla called it what it was, narrative control. Her editor finally nodded. That's a story the public understands, he said. They stole money, then used it to manage the backlash. Layla didn't celebrate. She felt cold, because now she could see the endgame. If the scam bought public silence, then exposing it meant fighting a machine designed to make truth feel pointless. 2 nights before the broadcast, a man approached Layla outside the studio. He didn't threaten her directly. He offered her safety wrapped in politeness. "You've done impressive work," he said, "but you're drawing lines between things that are not meant to be connected." Layla asked who he represented. He smiled. "I represent reality. Reality is messy. Your film will make it seem tidy, which invites misunderstanding." She told him she had receipts. He tilted his head. Receipts can be reclassified. Witnesses can be discredited. And if you force the state to choose between your career and its stability, it will choose stability. Then he walked away like a man leaving a restaurant. Layla slept badly, then woke with a clarity that felt like anger. She didn't need to prove every detail to the standard of courtroom. She needed to show the shape of the machine, with enough verified anchors that denial would sound absurd. The documentary opened with her own voice, calm and sharp. In public, governments say they cannot afford resilience. In private, they spend billions on it, then lose track of what they bought. She used archival clips of ministers praising transparency, then cut to procurement clauses that allowed secrecy. A simple contrast, promise versus practice. The mirror ledger wasn't hidden in darkness. It was filed in daylight and protected by complicated language. The broadcast hit at 9 p.m. Within minutes, social media exploded. Some viewers were outraged. Others were exhausted. Then the official response arrived, perfectly on schedule. These claims are exaggerated and risk undermining trust in vital institutions. The phrase vital institutions did heavy lifting. They didn't deny the contracts existed. They didn't deny the payments. They denied the interpretation. They framed Layla as reckless. Meridian Advisory issued its own statement. "We support lawful governance and do not engage in political activity." Meanwhile, the Finance Ministry announced a new task force, led by the same people who had signed the original approvals. Accountability, performed by the accused. The real retaliation came quietly. Layla's bank called to verify unusual activity and froze her account for 48 hours. Her landlord received an anonymous complaint about illegal subletting. Her network's advertisers started asking questions. That's how power punish now. Not with police. With friction. Make your life annoying until your courage becomes inconvenient. Jonas told her to expect it. "They don't need to kill you," he said. "They just need to make you expensive." Then he said something that landed like a confession. "Also, the scam will survive your documentary." Layla didn't argue. She knew the machine had redundancy. You could expose one route, and the money would find another. Still, exposure changed one thing. It made pretending harder. Harriet resurfaced through Diane, the retired auditor. She hadn't been arrested. She hadn't been cleared. She had been swallowed by process. An internal investigation that could last years. A legal limbo that discouraged allies. Harriet sent Layla a message. "I did what they said because it felt like the country needed it. Now I see the country was just the excuse." Layla replied, "Tell me what you can, when you can." Harriet answered, "I can tell you the final lie." "The final lie?" Harriet wrote, was that this was a rogue scheme. It's policy by other means, she said, and the people who could stop it rely on it to win elections, fund programs, and buy time. Months later, the task force released its findings. The language was soothing. Recommendations: improved oversight, enhanced transparency. There were no names, no prosecutions of senior officials. One contractor was fined. A junior accountant was charged with fraud. The public got a villain they could afford to hate. The state kept its mirror intact. Layla watched the press conference and felt something close to grief. Not because she lost, but because she saw the bargain society had made. People wanted stability more than truth, until instability arrived anyway. And the biggest scam wasn't just stolen money. It was stolen attention. $1 billion at a time, paid for by your ability to care. In the final scene of her follow-up film, Layla returned to Rotterdam. The empty warehouse now had banners and forklifts, freshly staged. A performance of reality. She filmed it and narrated. This is how the mirror ledger protects itself. Not by hiding, but by updating the set. She ended with a line she knew would anger officials, but land with viewers who had felt powerless too long. Governments pretend this scam doesn't exist because admitting it would force a choice. Cut the hidden pipeline, or admit the state has been running on unofficial money. Then she paused, letting silence do its work. And if the pipeline is unofficial, she said, so is the accountability, which means the only audit left is public memory.